Okay, give me the next video. No.
Hey, 42 here.
This, really?
Hey everyone, this is JV.
The Germans almost.
You know what? Our bulwark tutors.
EL here with my Bulwark colleague Andrew Egger with, another unhappy video for you explaining the things that are going on in the world that are terrible. Before we get started, you should go ahead and hit like and subscribe because it's not going to get any happier after this. Andrew, people are very concerned about political violence these days. We've written a lot about that at the Bulwark, starting in 2016 when Donald Trump was holding political rallies and telling his supporters to assault people and promising to pay for their legal bills, going through Charlottesville murder of Heather Heyer, going through the various spates of political violence we've had on the right and the left, right?
Even you think people are wrong about housing, wouldn't it be best politically to get people what they want? No, generally it's really bad politically to make concessions to young people in housing because it would mean fucking with older people's housing, and older people are more reliable voters than younger people. One of the big problems that we have in this country that's also untouchable, I think, is there's a lot of old people problems. They consume a fuck ton of healthcare. They have houses that they don't need, maybe. They got a lot of them. They're raking them up. But it's a loser voter problem. You can't do anything about that because you'll get destroyed for it.
Shooting of Steve Scalise, and through January 6th, and then to the terrible assassination of Charlie Kirk. This is a thing that I think you and I can agree that not the president or Stephen Miller or many Republicans, but some people have been very responsible about on the right. On the left, every name brand Democrat or liberal, I think, has behaved responsibly. I don't think we can point. You can find posts on Blue Sky and Twitter with progressive types saying irresponsible things, but I don't think you can point to like, hey, this representative or this senator or this governor or the editor of this magazine has been bad on this stuff. Would you agree?
Yeah, you can kind of stress test that proposition by the fact that, you know, the people who have been upheld, especially sort of in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the people who have been kind of held up as like the most grievous examples of left-wing justification of this sort of violence have been like small town mayors, some guy who maybe runs the city council in some 800 person Pennsylvania town. There was one of those. More at the national level, there's been this effort to censure Ilhan Omar, congresswoman who, retweeted a video basically right after the assassination, basically saying like, I condemn political violence, but let's not like sugarcoat, Charlie Kirk's life and work. And, when the video kind of went after his work in pretty strident terms, but was explicitly saying, no violence, we don't sanction the violence. And that's kind of been like the person that Republicans have sort of held up as like the worst of the worst right now. So yes, I think it's basically fair to say.
And to be clear, again, want to give credit where credit's due. Utah Governor Spencer Cox, very good on this. I mean, even Ted Cruz, very good on this. Like, no justifications of violence from them. Donald Trump, a little less so. Steve Miller, a little less so, but that's okay. Today, we have a piece over at the Daily Caller, which is, it's not the New York Times, but it's not nothing. I would say Daily Caller exists. Would you agree on the same level as, like, Breitbart, like a rung above the Federalist, sort of maybe a half rung below Breitbart in terms of prominence? Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, and they were founded, however long ago before I got to Washington. It was Tucker Carlson who originally founded the Caller, right? And it was kind of supposed to be sort of this upscale, reporting first, more sort of respectable right-wing publication, sort of ended up doing the thing most right-wing publications do or did at that time, which is chase a lot of traffic with, sort of histrionic content. Although the Daily Caller, I seem to remember, also itemized pretty hard into like cheesecake like listicles back in the day. So that was sort of a weird moment in time. Yeah, exactly. When are we going to do that? But yeah, I mean, as far as like where they are now, it's like they still have a pretty decent DC presence. So they do more actual reporting than a lot of these other right-wing outlets, not just sort of like opinion stuff. But
don't go crazy. I mean,
they have reporters, right? There are reporters.
They occasionally do a reported piece through their news foundation.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it. Okay, so today we get a piece by, again, not a nobody, not a 22-year-old intern. Jeffrey Ingersoll, who is currently editor at large, was one time the big boss chief over at the Daily Caller, and he has a column, the headline of which is "Enough is enough. I choose violence." I got to say, as a huge fan of Cersei Lannister, I was not immediately put off by the headline. I was like, okay, like I'm ready to roll with that. I'd like to journey through this though with you. We need, so I'm just going to read loads of quotes for us, book club here. Here's Jeffrey Ingersoll. "We need to reinstitute a public debt for antisocial and subversive behavior. In my opinion, some of this cost needs to be summary and ultra-violent." Is this a call for violence? Yes. Explicitly, it is.
Okay.
I mean, full credit to Ingersoll for not hiding the football here. He's not trying to, we should say this, there is nothing in this piece that is put there to give him plausible deniability. Do you have thoughts here, or do you want to save them to the end? Should we keep moving through? You tell me.
My very first initial thought is just not just violence, but ultra violence. I wonder if Ingersoll means anything specific by that, or whether that's just kind of a punch up word to make the copy sing a little more.
Well, we'll get to that. He has some examples. So he then goes on. He then begins to justify why ultraviolence is necessary, and it is because society has become so rotten and legal structure is no longer. Basically, it's the Batman. That's why he gives, again, because Batman. That's why. Here he is again. "In corrupt legal scenarios where the judges, prosecutors, and even police are all a part of a rigged system, what do we do? Choose violence. We all know the government is not going to help you in your time of need, especially a Soros-sponsored government. Conservatives looking to peacefully assemble and publicly debate need to be realistic. Nobody is going to help you. In fact, they are going to encourage violence. They're going to excuse, justify, and encourage it. We saw as much with Charlie Kirk. They were practically begging someone to go after him, and when someone did, they quickly justified it." So a couple things here. I think everybody could probably recognize that governments and laws do not always and everywhere satisfactorily handle outbreaks of political violence and violence, right? Sometimes people who appear to be guilty get off. That's a thing that happens, right? Many people thought the Kyle Rittenhouse killings were not actually good examples of lethal self-defense, but a jury of his peers didn't agree with that and found him innocent. And so this is a thing that happens, right? Sometimes prosecutors don't do the thing that we want them to. Sometimes juries don't do the things that we want them to, et cetera, et cetera. He doesn't seem to recognize it. He seems to say, like, any case in which he doesn't get the outcome he wants is an example that society is rotten and the government isn't going to help you in your time of need. But then he talks about how they justified what happened to Charlie Kirk. And again, as we said at the top, like, who is they?
I mean, he has some examples through here, right? He takes a weird detour into, like, I don't just mean like physical street violence. I also mean legal violence, which we should deploy to go after Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Barack Obama and Anthony Fauci, and like anybody who's ever displeased me, the editor at large of the Daily Caller, should probably have the pantsuit off them and their lives ruined. I mean, I don't know is there one through line? I don't know. I mean, it's all he's really letting it fly. Yeah.
So here we go. I'm going to let the legal violence stuff sit to the side because I think that's wrong. But like, you can have a conversation about that. Like, that's not, here's the stuff that starts getting pretty rough. "Bring security with you that's dying to dole out drubbings. I'm sure a fair amount of ex-cons who found Jesus loved Charlie Kirk. Maybe they need work. Whatever works. We need to."
What did they say? What are they reading off of? Is this just a random article on like the Caller, the Daily Caller, or whatever? Or is this like a notable Republican or?
"Reinstitute the cost. So some activist takes the sign next to your table at a public debate."
From Jeffrey Ingersoll on the Daily Caller. Okay.
Like what happened
From the
here.
head editor of the Daily Caller. Okay.
"She gets instantly clotheslined. I don't care if police are present. Do it anyway. In fact, be wildly disproportionate.
Jesus.
A fat black lady assaults your on-camera talent. Book the kind of security that has no qualms hospitalizing her and people like her." I mean, I wonder what he means by that. "Dudes rope up your car and start vandalizing it. Bros dismounting with cudgels. We'll fix that real quick. Turn it into an instant brawl, break bones, force corrupt police to intervene. I want blood in the streets." Before we go on here, I just have to ask, can you imagine what Fox News would say and how much airtime they would give if
CNN or WAPO
the editor of the New Republic
or New York Times
wrote a piece demanding, "I want blood in the streets"?
We had a little mini scandal along these lines when a random Canadian alt weekly had a piece in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death. Did you see anything about this? I don't remember the name of the publication, but like that was how keyed up they all were for like an instance of leftist rhetoric going too far. They dragged this poor mid-tier broadsheet from I don't know, Calgary or something. It wasn't Calgary, but like, yes, you are 100% correct. It would not go unnoticed if Current Affairs or the New Republic or the New Yorker were to itemize into this kind of rhetoric.
"We must stop clutching our principles and shouting stop." I mean, only some of you are clutching your principles and shouting stop, my conservative friends. "They own the legal system. That will achieve nothing." Not in Texas, is it? Where you're allowed to run people. Anyway, never mind. "We need action. Disproportionate, violent action. Pain and suffering. We need to raise the cost of obviating the social contract, measure it in blood if necessary. Change requires pain, and you're either taking it or inflicting it." That is Jeffrey Ingersoll of the Daily Caller. Again, not an intern, former head of the Daily Caller, now editor at large, and also not a one-off. If you go through his most recent pieces, restoring public order starts with viciously arresting more street liberals.
Street liberals, nice. Okay.
The rotten smell at the core of liberal politics is unmistakable. The playbook Trump should follow in Kirk's wake is simple, but it'll take brass balls. Charlie Kirk's murder should result in a purge. Does Trump have what it takes? I mean,
can I talk about this just for a quick second? Because
sure.
This is as I was reading through this and hearing you read those clips, the thing that was going over and over in my head is you would think these two things are like totally irreconcilable, right? That if it is true that like the federal government is starting to like really already crack down on these people, you wouldn't have to also call for street violence, right? I mean, you could just do everybody relax, Patriots in control, Donald Trump's getting rid of, the horrible George Soros prosecutors and the left-wing judges. And we've had this huge reactionary movement in this country to kind of distance ourselves certainly from defund the police, but from any real concern for human rights in policing, that there's been this enormous pendulum swing back toward, law and order, anti-crime policies. And all of those things are having these effects throughout the justice system. And isn't that a good thing? But on the one hand, he's calling for more and more and more of all of that. And then on the other hand, he goes over to this column and says, now, as all of us know, the justice system is completely incapable of dishing out justice. No one will ever receive their justice deserves through legal channels. And the only thing for you, Joe Patriot, to do is get out there and start cracking heads. I don't really understand that. The one other thing that I would say is just, it really grinds my gears how these things are always written from a sort of a posture of I'm the only bold truth teller who's willing to say the thing that must be said, right? Like everyone else will clutch to their pearls and respect the liberal pieties of course we oppose violence, but not me, because I know what really needs to be done. And it's it doesn't take any particular bravery to say what is really just sort of the default animal human response to hostile stimuli. You see a lot of people out there who you don't like for one reason or another, and you think that they're getting more over on you than your side's getting over on them, and your kind of Neanderthal response is to want to dish out violence. And we've sort of moved past that sometimes. We have sort of lifted ourselves gradually out of the muck of sort of Thomas Hobbes state of nature of nasty solitary poor brutish and short human violence one on another by building all these social structures that channel that anger off away from violence and channel better human behavior and better constructive things, and those are fine. It's good that we did that. It's the idea that everything that we have done since sort of the Stone Age is really just sort of these liberal niceties.
It's a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, it's come on, man. I don't want to live in a cave and wear animal furs and try to bash your head in with a club before you can do the same to me. That doesn't sound great. And I don't know if you would make it very far in your job as a web columnist under such an environment either, Mr. Ingersoll. So it's all very silly. I
mean, it's all about power, right? And this is what fascism always winds up being. It's just about power. It's not about internal consistency. It's not believe me, Jeffrey Ingersoll is not bothered by the tension between, yes, Trump is doing what needs to be done. Look at all these ICE agents throwing people down to the street. That's awesome. And you can't trust law or the government to safeguard you. We need to form up our own vigilante gangs and go out and put blood in the streets. That.
What's the status of the laptop? There's a guy called Chris Titus, I think, who has a huge Windows. He's got a Windows 11 minimum install, and then he has a debloat tool. So I usually do this on fresh install so that I don't have all this random fucking trash. So I'm installing programs, and then I'm going to do driver installs, and then I'm going to start throwing this shit together. Is the laptop still dead? No, I figured it out.
There's no pause being given between And the biggest tell on this is how MAGA approaches police authority. So whenever you see armed agents of the state committing violence against, say, anonymous black or brown people, the default reaction from MAGA is, well, they deserved it. And it's always they shot this guy and, he didn't comply fast enough. Or they threw this grandmother down onto the ground. Well, she touched them with her elbow. There's always But then you get to January 6th, and these people were beating the police. How dare they shoot that brave patriot, that poor lady, right? And it's this weird... True. It's all just power. There's no... It's just pure might makes right.
And it kind of collapses really any actual distinction between actual spheres of authority where specifically delineated agents of the state are righteous in wielding force under specifically delineated situations under the law in a constrained way, right? That matters much less. In fact, he's very plainly making it here. He wants the agents of the state to continue to wield power because the state is currently in the hands of a right-wing government. Right. But he also thinks that again, Joe Patriot out there on the street corner have just as much of a right as those cops do to wield power, because you also are wielding power on behalf of the political right, right? I mean, that is ultimately what it boils down to, is cops who are trying to forcibly constrain a right-wing, Trump-supporting mob on January 6th from doing whatever they might want to do, are not wielding their authority duly because they're doing the opposite of the right thing, which is for the political right to get its way, right? And so you strengthen the left-right distinction here to such a degree that there really is no distinction between like an ICE agent beating up somebody and you yourself beating up somebody, because it all really amounts to the same thing, which is putting the left in their place.
Yeah. And final thought here. There is this impulse, especially in the media.
Metatron made another slot video, a third one. What Destiny just did is evil. This guy, he's just because he's trying to farm views off me. If he wants to talk, we can talk, but he doesn't want to. He just wants to make slot views and farm like views on YouTube.
To both sides, everything. And be like, well, left-wing political violence is also really bad, and not everybody on the left said the right things about the Charlie Kirk murder. Here are these 5 anonymous accounts on Blue Sky that said terrible things justifying violence. I just think it is very important to say that if some liberal magazine editor wrote this column, basically every Democrat with any sort of national ambition would be put on the spot and told to repudiate it.
Yep.
I think that editor would probably lose his job within an hour or two. He certainly would never be welcome as a panelist on CNN again or CBS News. This is, again, we're not nitpicking. We're not grabbing some piece written by an intern for a blog that you've never heard of. This is the Daily Caller, which is, I would say like a second or third tier conservative media institution. And this is a guy who was the editor and is now the editor at large, saying explicitly that he's making a call for violence and he wants blood in the streets. And you guys out there listening to this, I want you to leave in the comments for me the name of every elected Republican and conservative writer, conservative personality out there who you see denouncing this guy. Because it's going to be a short fucking list. And that's the asymmetry.
Hey,
guys, hit like and hit subscribe. We'll bring you more of this sunshine on a near hourly basis from now until the end of America. Andrew, thanks for hanging out with me. I always show you a good time, don't I?
It's we have fun,
Good luck, America.
Thanks. Oh, fuck. I didn't mean to do this. Has anybody ever used the Snappy Driver Installer program before? Is this good?
You requested that we watch the airplane episode of House MD, but I couldn't do it alone. Welcome, special.
I can't watch this. We can't do this. It's too much. Raging moderates? Link me. You don't need driver installer slop? I do. I don't want to install all the fucking drivers on this fucking laptop. How do you use this stupid program? Oh my god. Oh, it's doing it automatically. I see. Never mind. Okay. Jesus. Download and install all.
Five years ago, I made a video for a channel called...
Okay. Richard Stallman. No. Why do you like this reel? Probably because it's based.
It was a meme that...
Oh, this was just depressing. I feel bad when I get like... Listen, if I come across a... what are the likes on this? If it has like a ton of likes on it and then I don't like it, I always get pressured into liking it. My algorithm is fucked sometimes. This is just a sad thing where she talks about texting some guy who killed himself. But then it's like, well, if I like skip this and I don't like it, then I'm like shitting on this person's legacy. And then I'm liking meme slop afterwards. It feels bad. The best video on Karen Reed.
Karen Reed counterparts.
2 hours. 2 hours. 2 hours. Bruh. Our dear friend Adam Mockler.
Can't you just take responsibility for it?
Oh,
on the left.
me?
You literally said that.
Listen, let me finish.
And then you agreed with it.
You want to know what I said? I said Donald Trump created this environment over the past decade. You sat here and said, I need to take responsibility. I'm a 22-year-old YouTuber. You hold me to a higher standard than the man that
I'm
we
holding
just
you to
listened
your standard.
to.
You're
Donald Trump was
Based.
vomiting
Based.
vitriol out of his mouth about how the other party is weak.
Wait, chat with me. Okay, hold on. The guy. What's up? What do you want, buddy?
Hey, what's up?
Nothing much. How's it going?
What's up? Going all right. So I've been harassing you in DGG chat. Apology for that. So I just wanted to discuss the recent pragmatic papers piece that was put out on some econ policy, which might hopefully improve the conversation a little bit in the community from the dumb things that we were
Wait, can you restate?
hearing earlier.
I can't tell if my speakers suck or if I couldn't understand the last thing you said. Restate that?
So I'm hoping to make the economic conversation in the community better.
Oh.
So that was part of the motivation for the piece, and I think we had a good demonstration of that with the HR conversation.
Okay, based.
So the piece that we did was like a working group, kind of like a little think tank, about 5 people involved in total, trying to kind of think about like, okay, given that like our views, the views that you've kind of expressed on stream, trying to think about like how to argue for economic policy for the working poor, to try to balance the fact that a lot of the takes that are obviously like in the community are kind of like pretty bad. And so like we find ourselves in a lot of situations where we're just kind of shitting on like basically everything that we hear, and don't put out like an affirmative kind of vision. That's kind of, I think, the motivation for it. Yeah.
That's good. Okay, yeah.
So one thing you often say, which I think generally I pretty much agree with, is that a lot of times people put forward like policy ideas and then like pretend like around economics, and then they assume basically that that kind of has normative weight when those are usually just like tools. And that's definitely true. There is a political reason to do that, which is that like kind of the political reason for that is that if most people already agree with a policy, you don't necessarily need everyone to agree on why that policy is good. If you just say, we should raise the minimum wage, and 70% of the population thinks we should raise the minimum wage, then like you kind of want them to have the illusion that they're all agreeing for the same reasons.
Yeah, there's probably a separate, like, the messaging, I shouldn't say messaging, the way that I talk about some policies are probably not compatible with, like, a voting messenger thing. I don't, like, if I was in charge of, like, doing messaging for a politician, I probably wouldn't tell them to go out there and rag on people over some things. Yeah, for sure, yeah, I agree with that,
Yeah, and I mean, there's a reason why politicians try to avoid gaffes of, like, you know, speaking too truthfully about, like, why they think about things, because someone might find some reason to disagree with them. Where like you don't want to create any negative feelings in someone listening to. But if you're making a policy argument, so that kind of thing, that ambiguity bleeds into kind of how other people talk about policy and argue about policy, and there it is incoherent. Because usually, but anyway, so in the piece, we kind of start off kind of taking head on the issue of like the normative argument that we're actually trying to address. Versus like because of the fact that people come from this from like so many different perspectives. You're talking about like helping the working poor. So for example, you know, some people might be like, well, my vision for the working poor is that everyone should be having a wonderful middle class life. And like and you could end up just totally talking past each other if you're having a conversation with someone with that view.
If everybody should have, say that everybody should have a what kind of life?
Like a nice, prosperous middle class life.
Oh, okay.
Or something like that, including like, you know, like the working poor or something like that. The society is unjust unless everyone is doing that. If that's where someone's coming from, then you're just going to be talking past each other. So the basic kind of thesis of like support for economic policy for the working poor is that there are injustices in life. However, given the fact that the working poor do have a lower station, like they kind of got the short stick economically already by the fact that their labor just isn't worth that much. And in a capitalist society like ours, that means they cannot attract like the same wages that are gonna like support a high income life. Because of that, it is kind of like, if we can take measures to make it so that some of the things that are shitty about being poor and make those go away, that's like there's a strong argument basically to be made that, okay, you've already taken enough punches for the team, so to speak, like with your labor position. We don't need to place additional things on you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you probably have to dig into specifics. What you mean there? Like one really uncomfortable question, I think, for a lot of people that I think people are unwilling to answer is like, what should like a working poor person be able to afford, or what should like a middle class person be able to afford? Like, what should be the difference between these two things? Because sometimes I think that if we're in the policy world right now, or even in the normative world, and we're not at like the messaging stage yet, like it's important to understand like, well, what is even possible? Because I feel like when you talk to a lot of people, the normative position is that like every working poor person should be able to afford, and then they'll go off and list like what's basically like a middle class lifestyle, and they'll say like a single person working like a full-time job at like a Burger King should be able to afford like a house and a car and everything else. And it's like, I don't know how realistic that is. You know, I don't know if you could ever have a society set up that way, or if there's ever even been a society that's even been set up that way. Yeah.
And I'm not sure you'd be able to win that argument. I think the strategy, hopefully, with deploying this type of an approach would be that you could, instead of like countering what they're saying, more like redirect the conversation into an area where you could find agreement. So like, so they might ultimately like, okay, yeah, I sign on to your argument, and I have an additional demand that I would want. And it's like, okay, you can have your additional demand. We're not going to get the coalition to pass that, but you can totally try.
Yeah, I guess. I think you could do that like in an isolated sense, but there's a lot of like resentment that builds up. I think a lot of it on social media, I think a lot of it was evidenced by that Luigi stuff. Like one of the things that I thought was so crazy is like everybody was on board with how evil it was that like a health insurance company had sentenced some guy to die. And the reason why he had been quote unquote sentenced to die was because the health insurance company denied, like as a final measure, a double lung transplant for somebody that was like a stage 4 lung cancer patient who'd already exhausted like all these other options. And it's like, holy shit, like, is this really what we're calling, you know, like injustice and execute? Like, yeah, like this, like the assumption that this would be guaranteed in any other country on the planet is like that's just not true. Like no country on the planet guarantees this much access to anything. And again, it's the problem is there are like so many examples like that where people's perceptions of what's available or what's, you know, what people can get in Europe or what's even possible in the United States or anything else. Like I think like half of my chat, I don't know, I'm maybe shooting up a little bit too much there, shooting up high. Like I'm estimating too high, but like. There's a conversation to be had about, for instance, like what resources are even available, you know, in our healthcare system. And a lot of people are under the perception that we have the resources to give every single person all of the care that they want. And there's not a resource problem at all, despite the fact that our healthcare system is like one of the most stressed systems in the United States. I think it's like the only industry that's still adding jobs to it because they're so hungry for workers because there's like so much demand on it. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to keep this policy within kind of the four corners of like kind of a discrete question, but yeah, definitely no individual thing is going to satisfy everyone. Sure. To kind of like, I guess, kind of juxtapose this against something I've heard you say on stream a little bit, which is, so I think this argument's like potentially a bit more powerful in a couple different ways than like your argument of like, well, why are you on the left, basically, which I think is more, it's a dispositional thing based on the fact that you realize that, hey, money really matters and like, it kind of really sucks to be poor, actually, in hindsight, is that it's the fact, basically, of like that we're all on the boat together, basically, and that, hey, it's actually not a good society for everyone when like we're not taking care of like our delivery drivers and things like that. Sure. Type arguments. I think that is a completely valid argument. I do think it's a weaker argument in two different ways. One is that it kind of depends on your kind of sentiment about like kind of just how you weigh that balance of equities. Like it personally to you is like a worse world. You would be willing to make a little bit of a trade-off to know that like everyone in society is being okay. And that also that it also doesn't lend itself to actually designing policy specifically that is supported by that rationale versus any other. So it's like, I want my delivery driver to be okay. It's like, well, how exactly, specifically? And then basically like anything that potentially benefits them, it seems like as good as any other, from a policy perspective, basically to address that. So the argument of like specific unfairnesses that are basically like that their economic life is made worse by the fact that you're a working poor person, can basically be something where like, okay, it actually gives you a target to like look at various aspects of someone whose life is working poor.
Wait, hold on. I'm totally
try
lost
to
on what is the topic right now? Or are you saying like how you would message differently on these as opposed to saying that it sucks if people can't afford to live here? Or what?
So it's more tying together the normative argument to policy design. So basically that every single policy design that you're thinking of, like, okay, because of this normative argument, we should do X policy. And like having it so that like it flows pretty naturally from that argument.
Oh, okay.
So in the case of like, well, I want to make sure my delivery driver's okay, and I'm willing to take a little bit of a hit for that.
Sure.
Which doesn't like really obviously, you can tie it together to various policies, but it's almost too vague. It doesn't really directly tie to like making an argument, and that's why we should do X, like specifically. And also like depending on how people feel about that, a lot of the things that would help the working poor actually do have trade-offs that would make your life worse in some ways. And depending on the person and how cold-hearted they are, they might have different feelings about that, about whether that actually is not beneficial to them. From that like argument more from like fairness though, I lay out kind of as an example of like kind of the benefits of it, is like kind of 6 policy areas where you could build like 6 like arguments for things to kind of improve the lives of the working poor in ways that it's kind of they're specifically disadvantaged beyond the fact that their labor is like pretty much interchangeable and not highly skilled. So we can go through like maybe a specific example might kind of tie how like the normative argument kind of plays.
Okay, go for it.
So one example is in the financial system as an example. So like our lives are like incredibly like financially interconnected, and like how like more than ever before, like banking and like various things like that. And it's still the case that if you are working poor, that the financial system is a very unpleasant place for you, because the amount of money at stake, like the amount of like your monthly balances of a few $100s in your checking account or things like that, is just not enough. Like it's not enough from a like to make basically you an attractive customer in any way. Unless that business is predatory in some way, or if it's basically like providing no service. It's just like providing no service. So like one example of a policy that potentially could improve this is, hey, like maybe it's not that much of an actual expense for most of society. It's just that it doesn't make business sense right now to, for instance, add like a reasonably high quality checking savings account with like full money service, maybe something that could be like
am I crazy? Are these not offered anymore? I feel like you always could get these.
So it depends on exactly where you set the line, obviously, of like in terms of like the threshold of how poor is working poor.
Well, no, I mean like I thought you could always get like a free like Wells Fargo checking account as long as you have like one transfer a month going to your savings account or something. I thought that generally, or maybe these are like.
There's been like different. It depends on like your area. There may be like fewer banks, or like it may or may not be available. It's inconsistent. It's like even on like the working poor side of things, most people have like access to like to a bank account. But at the same time, like you're also like there are lots of issues with like like fee models, basically, where they're like basically like the entire business model of the bank is trying to get an overdraft fee on you, basically.
Sure.
Type things to basically make it worth it to the bank to even have this account. Because just such a small account balance. Like this is like a type of thing that this is like slightly more relatively small. Maybe like the next thing's a little bit more significant, which is the fact that the ability to like access credit as a working poor person for kind of the standard kind of volatility, which is that like if you actually need like $500, $600 on short notice, that there's basically no loans that you can basically get access to that aren't like either incredibly short term, tied to like specific collateral, like payday loan type things, or like pawn shops, or things like that, which are like pretty predatory, and kind of like hanging over your head. So one thing you could potentially do is eliminate the restriction on like a small amount of use of, like, for instance, federal liabilities as like an example, that could be used as like collateral against like small loans to make them much more reasonable, like a much more reasonable loan terms. So, for example, you could use a small amount of your Social Security beneficiaries basically to like back up like $1,000 line of credit for the working poor, so that they would, if an expense basically comes up, they would be able to manage that and then have that kind of smoothed out over the course of like a year or two or something like that, and at like more like favorable interest rate like terms, that the like other parts of society are able to get access to smooth out these kinds of things. So like that's like another example where like where access to reasonable credit terms is a little bit more universal to the working poor, where the banking service thing, it would be more like, I think, kind of a nice public service aspect that like it is challenging if you're working poor to like get good access to like banking, where like the bank is going to care that much about you. They might offer you their online service just to like do like some like allow you to do kind of basic things, have a debit card, but they're not like necessarily gonna invest as much in your financial future in terms of like being able to, offer you advice and help you kind of explore options and troubleshoot and solve problems you're having.
I feel like most working poor people don't need to worry about that. Like, I don't think they have a bunch of capital problems where they're trying to efficiently allocate their funds to optimal diversified return.
I mean, if you look at studies of a lot of working poor people, they usually manage their money more carefully than middle class people. So I mean,
but they don't have any money to manage. They have a W-2 income that goes direct deposit to their bank account, and then they just try to like do their bills and then spend on recreation, right? It's not like they're trying to balance out multiple income streams or investments or anything, right?
I guess I'm more thinking like kind of short-term things, not like investment type management type stuff. I'm more thinking like issues of like things coming out at various times and like kind of like handling kind of the more volatility of like standard checking and savings type like stuff. Kind of a more routine basis, like what is this like $55 that just went out type questions, type issues. Being able to get like responsive and like effective help there. But so there's like this is like more like demonstrative of like the kind of like policy making kind of argument of how this basically flows from like kind of the normative argument that like the fact that like that the financial system is not a very like pleasant place for the working poor, typically, like in numerous ways, where depending on your particular situation, you might work with like a check cashing business, or maybe you rely on like payday loans or these various things. Like they affect different people in different ways, and like it's probably true that like if you looked at any one of these specific things, most working poor people probably don't have too much of a problem with it. But it is just generally true that that the financial models that make sense of providing financial service to the working poor are not as pleasant because they're just not as valuable of customers to the private market. So that's a situation where there's a public policy argument to be made that although managing your financial life may not be worth a huge amount to the market, it is worth the small amount that it would require as people and citizens of the country basically to make it so that these kinds of this assistance is available. As an example, we could quibble about and potentially go into deeper study of which specific policies in this sphere of the working poor's interaction with the financial system would be the most pragmatic, and we might end up with a slightly different set of proposals than the ones that we provided in the piece. And then does that do you disagree generally with the premise that the relationship between the working poor and the financial system is a strained one at the very least?
I actually think I would actually kind of disagree with that. I think that the big issue is not the financial system and their engagement with it. I think the big issue is there's just not money. That would be my feeling.
Well, I mean, them not having money is definitely an additional problem, for sure. But at the same time, I mean, you can see it for instance, if you just think of it in terms of percentage of lifetime earnings or something like that. If I, for instance, had a $10,000 expense come up out of nowhere, I would be able to take a loan against my 401k. I would just basically be able to withstand that, pay it off over a few a couple of years or something like that, and basically weather that just fine.
Yeah, but I think the issue there is not that a financial institution is enabling you to borrow against your 401k. The thing is you have money saved in your 401k to borrow against. I don't know if a person working at McDonald's or Burger King, especially in their 20s or 30s, is going to have a 401k to borrow against.
I agree that they don't have a 401k to borrow against, but I'm saying is if you look at someone's lifetime earnings, I mean, you're still talking about even if someone's only making $20,000 a year, let's say, that's a fraction of what I do. But still, if we're talking about an $800 hit or something like that, that is proportionally pretty similar. That's in the range of maybe a little less than the kind of example I gave with the 10,000. But there's basically nothing available because nothing that they their only asset is their labor value, and basically they're working, basically their earning power, and no one is going to loan against that earning power because there's just not enough surplus for it to basically necessarily be worth it, even if 85% of the time they probably would pay it back to get themselves in a better situation. Maybe that risk is just too high for anyone to want to loan against that, versus most of my value is backed by my income, but there is a decent portion and a growing portion that is backed by assets that are easy to collateralize.
Sure, but are you so you're talking about basically guaranteed government loans for working poor people?
Not so I wouldn't say that they're guaranteed by the government. I'd say they'd be guaranteed by federal benefits. So, for example, if you the liability that the government has, for instance, until you're against your future Social Security benefits, for example.
Yeah, but wouldn't that come off as mega predatory if people are maxing out their borrowing against their Social Security benefits in their 20s or 30s? Couldn't that get really predatory?
I wouldn't say it's like the predatory aspect is the like the high interest rate aspect of like a lot of these like loan operations and things like that.
Yeah, but I think I feel
I will
like
say that like I'd put a cap on it. I would probably I think legislate. There's a reason why we typically have not in the past allowed people to borrow against these benefits.
I feel like the predatory loan can also just be getting people to borrow against their 401k to buy dumb shit, right? Like the biggest meme when
these would be regulated. These would be regulated programs. So like you would have even just offering this as a conceivable option would be.
Yeah, but like, what would you be taking the money out for? Because like the biggest meme when I worked at the casino was whenever whenever April would roll around and people would get their refunds back for their taxes, they would immediately go and buy some dumb shit with it. So how would you prevent people from being able to borrow against their future 401k to not put down a payment on something stupid?
I think up to a small amount, let's say $1,000, or something like that. At like a reasonable interest rate, that would be like a potential risk that there would be some portion of the population that would do that. I think 85% of like a pretty high proportion of like the working poor like manage their money actually very carefully, and they're like trying to avoid get as much room to avoid the turbulence of life as possible, and that it would be wouldn't be.
Wait, what do you mean by when you say like manage their money very carefully? What do you mean by that?
I mean that they're like trying to stay within their budget. They're trying to like save as much as they can. They're basically trying to keep as much of a buffer as possible, but they just don't actually make enough to effectively do that.
So then, if 85% or if some like really high percentage could do this and then manage a loan effectively, why wouldn't there already be like a private lender lending money to these people and making money on this?
Not really. I mean, the kinds of ratios that like the of like purely just based on income, like the amount that you're willing to like loan to like the income of the person is like it's a pretty small ratio for it to make sense. And there's a reason why the credit card interest rates based on discretionary income, the interest rates are like over 20% to begin with. So like there's a reason that's the case, which is that the default rates are really high on this like the kind of discretionary loans. Even if like 75% of people are totally responsible.
Well, the interest rate on credit cards are high probably because it's all unsecured debt, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah, it's unsecured debt. So the working poor example would be unsecured debt too. If we're saying even if 75% of people are super responsible and would pay it back probably, unless something went wrong, it's still an unacceptably high like default rate probably.
Yeah. So then this would be a program there, but at some rate, it would either have to be subsidized by the federal government or there's just going to be a lot of people who are defaulting and then losing out on their Social Security.
So I think that most people probably wouldn't default just like normal. And the ones that are like potentially defaulting, it would basically it would be secured by a very small portion of your Social Security benefits. So as I said, like up to $1,000, you're talking about like that's like the equivalent of a couple months like worth of your Social Security benefits. It's not going to have like massively material impact.
Well, one, it would depend on when you did this, right? Because I don't know what the compounded interest would look like, but if you were taking this loan out when you were 25, and then are we really only limiting it to $1,000?
So like I include a couple different possibilities like in the piece as like an example here, which like one possibility would be basically like no questions asked, kind of a small line of credit which is available just to handle kind of volatility, give that option to people at reasonable interest rates. And then like potentially similar to like a 401k where like it's more of a need-based withdrawal where there's like significantly scrutiny for like basically there needs to be cause. So for example, a death in the family, something significant basically, and you could write up the list of causes, and then like that might push it up to like $4,000 or $5,000 or something, and like there being a significant reason. Type thing. But it would, I mean, just the sell of having it so that like you could utilize this as collateral would already be like a major like step. I think it would be like a massive net benefit to the people that you're concerned about. When if anything comes up where you need collateral, it's like it's to the pawn shop or something else like that like is it's quite a bit worse. But yeah. Does that make sense? The limits basically there. But as I said though, the idea of it is to kind of as a demonstration of like the sort of like connecting together of like the normative argument and then like directly tying to thinking about these specific areas and like policy prescriptions kind of directly tied into that.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand what you're saying. I feel like a lot of these services are already kind of available in a variety of ways. Like if you have a 401k, at least in my experience, usually your work has a mechanism to borrow against it. And I feel like borrowing against Social Security sounds like a really spooky thing. That's like a step towards the whole privatization argument. Although you could try to head that off, but like I just don't see people utilizing that responsibly. And then the idea that now you have a loan against your 401k that you're struggling to pay off on top of everything else seems like it could be spooky, I think.
I mean, these loan terms already exist, like in terms of like I'm saying like that you have the ability to borrow currently like $1,000 if you need to. The problem is that the only like mechanisms that are available to you are like incredibly predatory at doing it.
Yeah, but if they're predatory, the reason why they're predatory is probably because the default rate is very high and the loans are completely unsecured.
No, it's not so much that the default rate is so high. In fact, most of the loans I'm talking about are actually collateralized loans. So, for example, like payday loans, that's a collateralized loan. Obviously, it's backed by an upcoming paycheck. Or pawn shop loans, these are backed by actual assets that you happen to have in your household, or things like that. The issue with them is that that you have to actually talk to like a salesperson and get it set up. And we're talking about a loan of a few $100s here. And like to have a few $100 loan be worth even underwriting and having it being backed by collateral and having it like secured so that it makes sense to a lender. It's honestly not the fault of these lenders that they're such predatory loans, because it really wouldn't make sense as a business to write a 3 or 4%, like a 5-6% interest rate loan or something like that on like a $500 collateralized loan. It wouldn't make any sense.
I guess, but then if that wouldn't make any sense, then how would the government doing it make any sense?
Well, because like they already know what liabilities they have for somebody, so it would be trivial to know that you have collateral. You just make a note: we loan this person this much, they owe us this much.
Wait, how would that be any more trivial than like Wells Fargo or your bank noting it?
Well, they know who the that you paid in into Social Security and stuff like that. It would be a person wouldn't even need to be involved in like the $1,000 example. And like as I said, like we should probably take some of this human connect cost and not pass that on to the working poor for the fact that their financial lives are on a small monetary scale. I think generally it probably makes sense that they be offered similarly reasonable terms and not have to be effectively bearing like really bad loan terms because they're just not worth dealing with.
Okay, I see the vision. I don't know if I agree with this particular example, but I see the vision, sure.
Yeah. A couple that are a little bit more kind of generally, I think, more like kind of inner standard thing is like around kind of economic opportunity and moving up the ladder type things. Standard things involving like kind of helping like training programs and secondary education, things like that, which obviously people that are higher up the economic ladder obviously have a lot more access to taking those risks. And then also potentially like as well, like helping if you're interested in making a move, to like provide basically find ways to make that a like for economic like advantage if there's better prospects somewhere else, like a better labor market for you, to make that like an easier thing to do, where right now it's really people who already have pretty good prospects that are often most comfortable making that leap for like better opportunities. That's another one. And then there's a couple policies involving kind of like wage stuff, involving like being pro-union, I think comes, and then also like a reasonable increase in the minimum wage, because what is like, although the working poor like kind of are going to like earn less than like people above them on the with higher value market skills. At the same time, there's like an additional burden placed on them by the fact that basically everyone in that labor market is interchangeable with each other. That all you have to basically be is you have to show up on time, be a relatively conscientious worker, and a few weeks of training, and basically anyone in that labor market can basically replace each other. And that's not true of almost any other labor market, like for other than like the bottom of the working poor, effectively. And so that's like very hard to unionize or fix in really any other way than effectively finding a minimum wage level that balances the number of people that can be employed at a given wage and the income of that. Where exactly, I didn't put in there a number of where the minimum wage exactly should be. More kind of the approach of like what you would weigh in making that decision. And I think you probably just need to do like a full out kind of economic study to try to figure out like what reasonably balances those considerations.
Okay. All right. Hit me up with one more policy. Go for it.
So the other one I did is like the unionization one, which I mentioned. The PRO Act, which Democrats are already pushing for, I think is very easily supported by this for a similar reason to the minimum wage thing, which is that like working poor professions versus other like professions where you're in a specific economic niche, which is like where you have specific like where you're a lot more likely to have individual leverage with your employers, that a lot of people lower down on the economic ladder don't have those advantages, where without like effective union power, you're kind of stuck with where you're probably going to be getting lower wages as a group than you probably deserve if like economic things worked a little bit more like it does for other classes of society, and your negotiations with your employer.
Okay.
So that was the last one. I think we've actually have hit all 6, although we didn't talk about them all in depth. But if you read the paper and you think anything that you have additional thoughts on, let me know.
All right. I will do that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Talk to you later. Bye.
I'll be bye. Now that's what I call wow. I fucking hate laptops, bro. Okay. The Mockler, what do you got?
Can't you just take responsibility for it?
Oh, he
on
should,
the
wait,
left.
me?
You
Donald
literally
Trump's
said that.
Listen, let me finish.
And then you agreed with it.
You want to know what I said? I said Donald Trump created this environment over the past decade. You sat here and said, I need to take responsibility. I'm a 22-year-old YouTuber. You hold me to a higher standard than the man that
I'm
we
holding
just
you to
listened
your standard of your punditry.
Donald
Your
Trump was
punditry
just
is that Trump's at
vomiting
fault.
vitriol out of his mouth about how the other party is weak and evil. And he just said the party of hate, evil, and Satan. You blind yourself to that, and you're focusing on a 22-year-old YouTuber.
Hey everyone, Adam Mockler here. This is going to be a good video. I just wrapped up my New York Media Week with one final debate on CNN, and I faced off against MAGA commentator and Trump's friend, Scott Jennings. So I urge you guys to watch until the end. I urge you guys to follow the Adam Mockler feed, and once again, thank you all.
The series of events that took place here, we have to actually be clear about what happened, right? He tried to pressure Eric Siebert at the Eastern District of Virginia to pursue this prosecution. He did not. The U.S. prosecutors there said they did not see enough evidence. So he forces him out. He publicly declares to Pam Bondi, you need to target these political enemies, specifically labeling James Comey. And then, right after that, installs Lindsay Halligan, a former insurance lawyer with no prosecutorial experience, to go in there, and then within days, Comey's indicted even after rank and file prosecutors, they gave her a declination memo that said, this is why we don't think there's enough evidence. So I don't think this is just the process playing out. I think this is Donald Trump explicitly abusing his power and directing a prosecution of a political enemy.
You said we have to be very clear about what happened, and then you left out the most critical part, where a prosecutor has to go into a grand jury, present the evidence, and make the case why charges are warranted.
Right there, they should say, oh, okay, we're trusting the grand jury to deliver an indictment, probable cause. Do you believe the grand jury that issued the indictments against Trump? Because there were two federal grand juries, and there was the in New York State, I believe they needed a grand jury, right? And then I don't know in Georgia for that RICO case if indictments had been issued yet. And then, do you also trust the jury in New York that returned a guilty verdict on Trump's case? Because right now, you are worshiping the grand jury that returned 2 counts for Comey, which, remember, there's only probable cause, okay? You worship them, but I feel like Trumples hated juries and grand juries whenever it involved Donald Trump. So what's going on there?
And the grand jury has to agree with that. In this case, they did. Now, I don't know if he'll be convicted or not, but you can't leave out and deny that there's a critical step where average, ordinary Americans get put in a room and they ultimately have to decide, does a case go or does it not go?
Oh, now we know all sorts of things about the grand jury process.
And then they will decide whether you're guilty or whether you're not guilty. That is an important part of the process that he cannot really alter or change.
Just worth noting, I mean, two things. One, there was a third charge that the grand jury said no to. But also, I mean, this is, you probably will hear a lot about this as this proceeds. Probable cause is what you need to get a charge, which is a very low bar.
Good job.
Beyond a reasonable doubt is what you need to actually convict. But to Alyssa's point, that may not be the point of the message that's being sent here.
True.
Yeah, Donald Trump has done this with a few people. He directly calls out their name online on his Truth Social, and then within days, you see them either targeted, their show gets pulled off, they get indicted. And when it comes to Eric Siebert, you can sit here and argue that, Trump had nothing to do with this, but it's so clear that he was putting his thumb on the scale when he fired Eric Siebert, and then, 6 days before the statute of limitations are up, this new federal prosecutor is rushing this through. And I agree, we should let the process play out. It's fine to let it go through a grand jury. But can you at least concede that Trump was putting his thumb on the scale when he posted Comey's name, 4 days before Comey was indicted?
I don't think anyone is disputing that he thinks James Comey
Did he put his thumb on the scale,
is a bad person who deserves
Good call. Do you see how Adam said, put his thumb on the scale? Because right away, what this Trump worshiper started to do was say some irrelevant, retarded shit. Right? Immediately. It's like they all have the media training to avoid every fucking question. You're getting mogged by, a 22-year-old. That's how fucking pathetic and worthless your entire political career has led you to an area where a guy who doesn't even barely comb his hair for his fucking CNN appearances is mogging the fuck out of you. You look like you're about to cry. You couldn't even answer his fucking question. How ashamed should you be of yourself?
He posted Comey's name, 4 days before Comey was indicted.
I don't think anyone is disputing that he thinks James Comey
Did he put his thumb on the scale,
is a bad person who deserves to be investigated, and if a grand jury so chooses,
Did Trump put his thumb on the scale, though?
He has never denied that. He's been very clear about it.
Look, how is he just repeating? It's good. Look, he got him. Yeah, because he asked the same question 3 times because this guy won't answer.
Not?
Isn't this all just kind of exhausting for the American?
And then he gets off the hook. Nice. Now we go to the next person. Whew, he can take a breath where he's not getting fucking pressed by the child across the table from him. He's getting pressed into the ground, grinded into dust.
Public, like Trump did run on we shouldn't weaponize the DOJ.
It's exhausting now?
No, it was exhausting when
now?
Biden did it. It was exhausting when
now we're exhausted.
No. I criticized it when Joe Biden did it.
Can I ask
but
you?
now
not trying to rag on Adam. I think Adam's doing a great job here. I just think it's funny that these like career politics fucking losers are like forced to be so absolutely absurd and ridiculous, and they know they are. This guy knows that he's playing. He's doing a performance here, so his God Emperor Trump claps for him at the end of this. But
now he's choosing to do the exact same thing at a much grander scale, all while there are fewer jobs than there are people unemployed right now. Why is this
running for president?
He had a trial.
Can anyone point to one single example of President Joe Biden, privately or publicly, in any documented evidence of our reality, directing his Attorney General Merrick Garland to prosecute his political opponents, let alone protect his own son, who got indicted under his watch? When did
what?
Show me.
He pardoned him.
Show me the answer to.
Look at how happy he is. Oh, you pardoned him. Oh, you pardoned him. That's not what he asked. That wasn't the question. Is this guy been tested? Does he like have, can he even hear what's going on? Or is there like a dementia thing going on here? Or nobody asked if he was pardoned or not. I'm sorry, are you saying that pardoning counts as putting your finger on the scale? Oh, well then let's talk about the hundreds of J6 pardons then. Like that's just super easy. We can go from there to there if you want. Oh, but that's probably different, huh?
When did he direct Merrick Garland to prosecute Donald Trump?
I want your answer. He publicly, in a Politico story, was reported to have been fuming to anyone who would listen that Merrick Garland was not moving fast enough.
Unbelievable. Even Pisco cited this bullshit sometimes. Biden is allowed to be upset about things, but Biden was not pressuring anybody to put charges on anybody. If he was, the Merrick Garland shit would have moved 2 years faster.
In a Politico story, was reported to have been fuming to anyone who would listen that Merrick Garland was not moving fast enough.
Wait, so he publicly was fuming privately? Is that what you're saying?
He asked for a
Did he tell Merrick Garland?
Oh, Adam got him again. He was publicly fuming privately because that was a leaked story. That wasn't anything that was like publicly stated. It's not like Trump coming out and making huge statements on Truth Social.
Prosecute these specific people.
And by the way, I don't know living Democrats.
Oh, and here comes her to save this guy. I don't think she's necessarily doing it intentionally, right? But this guy gets saved from answering any tough question ever.
Wait. I think this is super important. So are you suggesting that because Joe Biden was angry about something but didn't express it to Merrick Garland, that
good refocus.
Constitution?
You don't know whether he did or he didn't, but I know it was put in a story.
You don't know. Oh, you have no idea. We don't even know. Okay, then you don't know. So then you don't know if Biden did something as bad as what we know Trump did, because we know that Trump did this, right? We know that for a fact. We know that Trump did it. Yeah?
But do you know?
This is what you guys just said. He says things out loud.
Scott,
Joe Biden said things out loud.
He says things out loud. Oh, so we've gone from he's just joking to he says things out loud. Okay. Good one, Chief.
Reported in a Politico, so people would hear it.
Factual issue here with this idea that Democrats, Joe Biden did this to Trump.
I didn't bring up Joe Biden. I'm not the person who said this.
Listen, where's the proof? Don't we need
to be honest,
that
I think
happened?
we either need to agree that weaponizing the DOJ against political adversaries is bad, or it's not. I think it's bad regardless of who's doing it. I think that.
Oh, we got both sides are here. Oh, yikes. Okay, opinion of her went down 1 billion times. Not good. We got both sides are coming through.
Donald Trump ran on not doing it, and he is directly doing it.
Are you sure Comey is not guilty?
No, and I'm not prejudging that. I've talked about this extensively on air. If there's any wrongdoing,
it's bad for Trump to place pressure.
I think that putting what looks like a DM to your attorney general on Truth Social and being like, not a few days, it's not good. It ain't good.
I'm going to ask for them to point out either any example of Joe Biden doing this, no example. Scott Jennings said, I don't know anything. That's always your fallback. Donald Trump directly asked Pam Bondi.
There was a story.
Do you remember when Biden said, hey, Merrick, can you go after this person?
The call out, the fallback. Oh, the legendary, I don't know strategy. The legendary, I haven't heard of that. I'm not entirely sure.
Back. Donald Trump directly asked Pam Bondi.
There was a story.
Do you remember when Biden said, hey, Merrick, can you go after this person? It didn't happen. You have no example.
And also,
it's literally in the news. I'm sorry.
He's literally in the news. He is, or there's a leak to Politico saying that he was upset behind the scenes with no confirmation and no statements or no accusations of him going to Merrick Garland and expressing his discontent.
Like 12, but it happened. It's like it happened.
It never was reported. And also,
it was reported.
It was never reported that he told Merrick Garland to indict. And that was never reported. We know that. And also, I just have to say,
reporting said or not?
Yes, no, there was a story.
The reporting said that he told Merrick Garland.
The point of the story was that Joe Biden was mad and he was angry, and the point of the story was that it would get out so that they could feel pressure to move on.
Oh my! That's the schizo theory that Biden was expressing anger to somebody with the hopes that they would leak it publicly, with the hopes that Merrick Garland would read it, with the hopes that that would alter his trajectory for how he was handling any of the investigations. Oh my fucking God. Give me a break. That's what he just said.
And he told who?
It was done in the report.
Okay, Adam, I want to play what Bill Maher said about this in the same genre and get your take on the other side.
The Democrats definitely need an outsider. To me, the Democratic Party is a ghost brand. And if you could have somebody take it over who's not sentimental about that company and, relaunch it, rebrand it, but it would have to be somebody who is unapologetic about calling them out. People have lost faith in the Democratic Party for very good reasons. You're the only one I hear who doesn't look like he cares what the other Democrats will say.
He compared them to Abercrombie and Fitch, a ghost brand. What do you think?
I think that, he's right that we need more unapologetic Democrats, but it's more than that. The Democratic brand is two things right now. It's a lot of things, but it's both risk averse and it's very, very finger waggy. So all of our politicians are incredibly risk averse. So they're not out there taking risks or trying to do new things. They're playing it very, very safe. Even as much as I love Kamala Harris, and I thought she did well in her campaign, she was very risk averse during all of that. But on the other side of that, while they're being risk averse, they're also just like purity testing everybody and finger wagging them. I'm a young dude. I like a little bit of like edge in my politicians. I think most young dudes like an edgy politician, not somebody who's out there being, super scripted and tested and everything. So all this comes together to create an environment where, like, I had a young friend the other day who's pretty liberal say that the Democratic Party feels quote unquote suffocating at times, and I think that's a good way to put it.
It's that and academic. A lot of times, the simplicity is missing in the message. Donald Trump is being accused of inciting violence after his warning to Democrats. This in response to the new developments in the deadly attack at an ICE facility.
The radical left is causing the problem. They're out of control. They're saying things, and they're really dumb people. I look at Crockett. I look at some of these people. They're very low IQ people, actually. But the radical left is causing this problem, not the right, the radical left. And it's going to get worse, and ultimately it's going to go back on them. Bad things happen when they play these games.
Jesus.
And I'll give you a little clue. The right is a lot tougher than the left.
Jesus.
But the right's not doing this. They're not doing it, and they better not get them energized.
Nice.
That was an odd thing to say. In this moment, the point about
the treating him like a retarded. It's an odd thing to say, right? We're so accepting of this environment. It's so unhinged.
Kind of anti-ICE nature of the shooting is taken, right? We know that. But then for him to say it might come back to them, I'm not sure that is what's right here.
Yeah, I'm pretty tired of conservatives gaslighting about the current political environment and Donald Trump's rhetoric when all of this escalation can be traced back to his entrance into American politics. His claim to fame was saying that Obama wasn't born in America.
True.
He was the first presidential candidate to have his crowd chant, "Lock her up," about a political opponent. You can bring up the insurrection. Even in the past few weeks, in my home city of Chicago, he posted a photo of Chicago being invaded by the Department of War. So the broader point here is Donald Trump endlessly deflects and tries to blame it on the other side when he is the one responsible for amping up the tension in America. And I've spent all of my formative...
All right, okay. Now we got to counter with some random irrelevant bullshit. Okay, he's got it loaded. Okay, we got what do we have? We got the Minnesota bail fund that Kamala tweeted. And if that fails, we can always just go to random shit from all the lefties. Maybe we can bring up the BLM Summer of Love. They love that phrase, maybe. Okay, what do we got? Load them up.
Years throughout high school, throughout college, looking to the president, who I'm supposed to be able to look up to, and seeing somebody who's trying.
And then there's always the fan favorite of like, what about all the times that people call him a Nazi or a fascist?
Place blame on the left, who's amping up the rhetoric constantly, and yeah, it's not good.
So you think it's Donald Trump's fault that a deranged leftist climbed up to the top of a building and shot up the ICE facility, not once now, but twice in Texas?
I think it's Donald Trump's fault that America has gotten to this heated place. I think that's
no responsibility for the radicalization on the left that's causing this violent outburst.
That 29-year-old's radicalized by online communities and online algorithms. I'm not going to blame that directly on Trump, but he was caught in a lot of online video game algorithms and all these communities. Donald Trump,
but it's Trump's
10
fault.
Years ago, Donald Trump amped up the tension in America.
So he ran 10 years ago, and this guy then 10 years later, somehow you're connecting. Can't you just take responsibility for it?
Oh,
we don't know anything about. Has anything been released about this ICE shooter guy yet? Do we know anything about, like, when you say radicalized by love, who the fuck radicalized him? Who are we talking about here? Who was this guy watching? Do we know anything about this guy at all? What the fuck are you talking about?
On the left. Let's not do he has to take responsibility for the Democrats.
I'm a 22-year-old YouTuber. You want me to take responsibility for the president of the United States?
I want you to understand.
I'm a 22-year-old
I want you to understand that we are in the middle of an epidemic of left-wing violence. They're attacking ICE. They shot Charlie. It's happening all over the country. We have these Free Palestine people running around trying to burn down the Pennsylvania governor's mansion. On and on
then
and
maybe
on.
The president
it's not Trump's fault. The left is radicalized to the point.
The Free Palestine people were the ones that burned down Josh Shapiro's mansion. The Free Palestine people, there's a whole group of them now? The guy who was trying to get all of his family to register and vote for Trump, by the way, before he did that, by the way.
I was saying, we're done talking, and we're going to start shooting.
Is Trump amping down the tensions?
Amping down the tensions?
Yeah, is he taking the tensions down? Is he trying to do that?
I don't know. What about the left?
I think he's mad that his friend got murdered. If you want
what the fuck kind of answer is that? So then no, he's angry, so he's not. Why can't he ever answer a fucking question? I hate these people, dude. These people are demons.
It's to tone down the rhetoric.
Yeah, number one on the
tone down the rhetoric. Come on, dog. It's just the president.
Trump front, we need unifying leadership from the top. You didn't hear Obama, Dylan Roof shot up a black church, he's saying amazing grace. He didn't say, I will go after my enemies, number one. Number two, we see the data indicates otherwise. There is left-wing violence. Right-wing violence, the Cato Institute, far from some far left liberal bastion, said 60% of the murders from political terrorism between 1975 and September 11, 2025 was from the right? The second below that is jihadists at 23%. So the data doesn't, and also the DOJ scrubbed the website that said more of the violence comes from the right. And again, I actually don't want to get into the game of blaming because I actually agree with Adam's take from the other night. We talked about the acceleration of radicalization online. There's a broader problem with young men incel culture that's going on here. That's not just like, obviously we need our political leaders to be more representative of like positive masculinity and of not just blaming the other side. And every time there's an instance of violence saying, you know what? I'm going to prosecute Soros. Now, next up, that's not the way to do it. So I think Adam's right. It comes from the top down. And I think at the same time.
So now we have two people here who are saying it's Donald Trump's fault.
Scott,
someone shot up an ICE facility. You literally said that. And then you agreed with it.
You want to know what I said? I said Donald Trump created this environment over the past decade. You sat here and said, I need to take responsibility. I'm a 22-year-old YouTuber. You hold me to a higher standard than the man that
I'm
you
holding you
just
to your
listened
standard of your punishment.
Donald
Your
Trump was
punishment
just
is Trump's
vomiting
fault.
vitriol out of his mouth about how the other party is weak and evil. And he just said the party of hate, evil, and Satan. You blind yourself to that, and you're focusing on a 22-year-old YouTuber.
Since I've been in politics, I was working for members who were whiskey during the congressional shooting. We didn't know if they were okay for many hours. I remember what happened. People didn't say, oh, he was a Bernie bro, so we're going to come for the Bernie bros. There was this nature of we are going to realize something terrible happened and we're going to move on. You pointed to Dylan Roof, which was political in the way that Obama handled it, but the Minnesota lawmakers, Paul Pelosi, I understand why the right feels like they're the victims more. I asked somebody very close to me who's a big MAGA person, and they said, well, they tried to kill the president twice and they just shot Charlie Kirk. Everyone in America knows those two things happen. Most Americans can't name those Minnesota lawmakers. They probably think something happened to Paul Pelosi and they don't really know, but the data itself is pretty clear. This is a problem we have to acknowledge that exists on both sides. The sooner we take responsibility for all our rhetoric, and there is left-wing rhetoric that I think is very dangerous and contributes to the anti-sentiment, but this is not one side only.
We're back, and it's time for your unpopular
Oh, I see both sides. It just
opinions. You each have 30 seconds to tell us yours.
Yeah, mine is on the most important story of the week, okay? The rapture. The TikTokers that were preparing for the rapture, they need to be hired by FEMA, okay? Sure, they got the timing wrong slightly, but the preparation and the detail orientation was fantastic. They were talking about where to position your arms when you're being raptured. They were saying don't look down as you're flying through the air. Really pointed suggestions that we need in FEMA so that could be directed. And then you unleash this swarm of influencers.
You know, my side is going to eat me alive for this, but I do think Donald Trump is right. Diet Coke is the best drink on the planet. Like, I can't get enough of it. You can't even overdose on something. I need to chill out on it.
Oh, Adam was scoring such high points.
Popular opinion? That's a popular
If you said
opinion.
Diet Pepsi, I feel like that's highly unpopular.
All right, everybody, thank you so much, and thanks for watching Table for Five. You can catch me every weeknight at 10 o'clock.
Okay. Listen, I love you guys. I'm going to fuck with this and make this work. I'll be back tomorrow. Stay safe. Wait, did I do connections? I think I already did them. I did. We're going to cappuccino, cappuccino. Be careful. Stay safe. I love you all.